pulls me in the air, it shivers cold and thin.
Echoes of the Forgotten Bride. Episode 2, Her Portrait in the Tide. The ocean is an artist. It sculpts cliffs, smooth stones, carves caves into cathedral spaces. But sometimes it uses other hands, other eyes, other souls to paint its stories. This is the second echo. Elara Moss woke up in the hospital with no memory of the crash. They told her the car had skidded on rain-slicked road, told her she'd gone through the guardrail, told her she'd been underwater for 3 minutes before the rescue divers pulled her out. 3 minutes, long enough to drown, long enough to die. But she hadn't died, her body had survived. Her mind, however, had been somewhere else, somewhere deep, somewhere cold. And it had brought something back with it. The doctors released her after a week. Mild concussion, bruised ribs, some memory loss, but that was normal with head trauma. She'd heal, she'd remember, she'd be fine. They were wrong. Elara returned to her small studio apartment in Haven's End. She'd moved there 6 months ago, chasing a dream of becoming a real artist, not just someone who sketched in the margins of grocery lists. The town's gray beauty had called to her, the lighthouse, the cliffs, the endless, moody sea. Now looking at her easel, at her half-finished seascapes, she felt nothing. They seemed like someone else's work, a stranger's vision. Her hands itched, not the surface itch you could scratch, something deeper, something that lived in her bones. She picked up a brush without thinking, loaded it with paint. Cobalt blue, Prussian blue, Payne's gray, titanium white. And she began. Her hand moved across the canvas with a certainty she'd never possessed before. Stroke after stroke, building form, building shadow, building a face. When she finally stopped, hours later, her arm was numb, her back ached, and on the canvas was a woman. Young, beautiful, wearing a dress from another era, high-necked and elegant. Her hair was swept up in an elaborate style. Early 20th century, maybe. Her expression was serene, but her eyes held an infinite sadness. Elara didn't remember painting it, didn't remember choosing the subject. But the woman's face was burned into her mind now, as familiar as her own reflection. She tried to paint something else the next day. A still life, apples in a bowl, simple, safe. But her hand wouldn't cooperate. It moved on its own, mixing the same blues and grays, recreating the same face, the same dress, the same sorrowful eyes. Again, and again, and again. By the end of the week, her apartment was filled with portraits of the woman, different sizes, different angles, but always the same face, always the same grief. Elara knew she should be frightened, should seek help, but the paintings were the best work she'd ever done. They were hauntingly beautiful, and some small, dark part of her didn't want them to stop. She posted one online just to see. Within hours it had hundreds of likes, comments poured in. Stunning, ethereal, who is she, where can I buy a print? Someone else commented, she looks familiar. Is that from a historical photo? Another reminds me of those old portraits at the Haven's End Historical Society. Elara's heart stuttered. The Historical Society, she'd never been there, but suddenly she needed to. The building was a converted Victorian mansion on the hill overlooking the harbor. Inside, it smelled of old paper and lemon polish. A young man sat at the front desk, typing on a laptop. He looked up when the door chimed. Welcome to the Historical Society. I'm Thomas. Can I help you find something specific? Elara hesitated. How did you explain that you were being compelled to paint a stranger over and over, that your art was no longer your own? I'm looking for information on local families, early 1900s, women specifically. Thomas smiled. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, historian eyes, curious and gentle. We have quite a collection, any particular family. I don't know the name, but I have a face. She pulled out her phone, showed him a photo of one of the paintings. Thomas went very still, the color drained from his face. Where did you see her? I painted her, I don't know why, she just keeps appearing. Thomas stood abruptly. Come with me. He led her through the mansion, past displays of fishing equipment and ship models, to a back room lined with photographs and portraits. He stopped in front of a large frame. Eleanor Hartley, daughter of the Hartley shipping family, one of the wealthiest families in Havens End in the early 20th century. The photograph was faded, sepia-toned, but the face was unmistakable. The woman from Elara's paintings stared back at her from across a century. What happened to her? Thomas's expression darkened. She disappeared on her wedding day, June 14, 1923. She was supposed to marry Charles Mercer, son of another prominent family. The ceremony was scheduled for sunset at the Hartley estate, but Eleanor never appeared. They found her wedding dress later, tangled in the rocks at Widow's Cove. Her body was never recovered. Elara felt cold, the kind of cold that came from inside. Did they ever find out what happened? Officially, they ruled it a tragic accident. Suicide was whispered but never confirmed. Some said she got cold feet and ran. Some said she was murdered. The truth died with her. And Charles Mercer. He left Havens End immediately after, moved to Boston, never married, died in 1965. Elara couldn't look away from the photograph. Eleanor's eyes seemed to follow her, seemed to plead. Can I research her? Is there more information? Thomas studied her face. Are you writing something, a book? No, I'm an artist. I've been painting her, over and over. I don't know why, I just need to understand. Something shifted in Thomas's expression. Recognition, understanding, maybe a little fear. You were in that car accident, the one last month. I read about it in the paper. Yes, how did you? You went into the water at Widow's Cove. That's where they found Eleanor's dress. Elara's breath caught, the cold spread through her chest. I don't remember the accident. I don't remember anything after the guardrail. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'll help you. Whatever's happening, we'll figure it out together, but you need to promise me something. What? If things get strange, if you start feeling like you're not in control, you'll tell me immediately. Why? Because Havens End has a long history of people becoming obsessed with the past, with the stories the sea tells, and it doesn't always end well. Elara should have walked away, should have gone home and destroyed every painting, should have left Havens End and never looked back. But she didn't. Because Thomas was looking at her like she mattered, like her strange compulsion was important, like she wasn't alone. I promise. They began meeting every day. Thomas brought her archives, newspaper clippings, letters, photographs. The story of Eleanor Hartley emerged piece by piece. She'd been beloved, artistic herself, a pianist. Her engagement to Charles Mercer had been announced with great fanfare, two powerful families uniting, but in her private letters, Eleanor seemed melancholy, distant. One letter to a friend stood out. Elara read it aloud while Thomas organized files. I cannot go through with it. I know what is expected. I know what I owe my family, but Charles does not love me, not truly. He loves what I represent, and I fear that if I marry him, I shall drown in the role he needs me to play. Drown, the word sent a chill through Elara. That was written 2 weeks before the wedding. Thomas nodded, and then she disappeared. Some accounts say Charles was angry about something that day, that they argued, but no one knows for certain. Elara's paintings were changing. The newest ones showed Eleanor in her wedding dress, but now the background was visible, water, dark, swirling water, and Eleanor's serene expression had shifted. Now she looked terrified. Elara hadn't consciously painted the changes. She would start a portrait, and when she came back to herself hours later, the image would be complete, more detailed, more disturbing. In one painting, there were hands in the water, holding Eleanor down, pressing her beneath the surface. In another, Eleanor's eyes were open underwater, staring up through ripples at a figure standing on the shore above her. Thomas, I didn't paint this. I don't remember painting this. Thomas studied the canvas. His face was pale. Elara, these details, the ring on the hand, the signet ring, that's the Mercer family crest. You think Charles killed her. I think something wants us to know what really happened. That night, Elara sleepwalked for the first time. She woke up on the rocks at Widow's Cove, her feet bloody, her nightgown soaked. The tide was coming in. Another few minutes and she would have been swept away. Thomas found her. He'd followed when she didn't answer her phone. He'd been worried, and he'd been right to worry. He wrapped her in his jacket, drove her home, stayed with her until dawn, watching to make sure she didn't wander again. This is getting dangerous. We should stop. Forget Eleanor, forget all of it. But Elara shook her head. I can't, don't you see? She won't let me. She's showing me what happened. She's using me to tell the truth. Thomas took her hand, then we finished this, together, but we do it carefully. Something had shifted between them. The professional courtesy had become something warmer, something that made Elara's heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. They spent more time together, research sessions that turned into long dinners, conversations about Eleanor that became conversations about themselves. Thomas told her about his failed engagement, how his fiancée had wanted him to leave End's End to take a position at a prestigious university, how he'd chosen the town and its stories over her. I've always been more comfortable with the past than the present. Elara understood. She'd been drifting before the accident, no real connections, no real purpose. Now, even with the strangeness, even with the fear, she felt anchored by the mystery, by Thomas. And maybe she was starting to realize by something more. They kissed for the first time in the Historical Society's archive room, surrounded by a century of secrets. It was soft, sweet, tentative. Is this a terrible idea? Thomas smiled, probably, but I stopped making good decisions when I met you. That night, Elara's paintings became violent. Eleanor wasn't just drowning anymore, she was fighting. Her hands clawed at the water, at the hands holding her down. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. And in the corner of one canvas, painted in tiny, precise letters that Elara had no memory of writing, were words. He pushed me. He held me. He watched me die. Thomas came over immediately when she called. He stared at the words, at the desperate, drowning Eleanor. We need to find proof, real proof. If Charles killed her, there has to be evidence. They searched county records, police reports, nothing concrete. Charles Mercer had been questioned and cleared. His alibi was solid. He'd been at the church waiting for his bride. But then Thomas found something else. A letter buried in the Historical Society's miscellaneous files, written by a maid who'd worked at the Hartley estate, never sent, never posted. It was dated June 20th, 1923, 6 days after Eleanor disappeared. Thomas read it aloud. I cannot stay silent any longer. I saw him that day, Mr. Charles. He came to the house before the wedding. He and Miss Eleanor walked to the cove. I heard them arguing. She said she could not marry him. She said she loved another. He became enraged. I was frightened. I went to fetch help. But when I returned, Miss Eleanor was gone and Mr. Charles was walking back alone. His clothes were wet. His face was calm, like nothing had happened. When they asked him later, he said he never saw her. That he went straight to the church. But I saw him, I saw. There, that's the proof. Thomas shook his head. It's not enough. She never sent it, never testified. Without corroboration, it's just speculation. Elara felt a desperate, clawing frustration. Then what do we do? How do we give Eleanor peace? Thomas looked at her, really looked. I think she already has it, by telling you, by showing you, by making sure someone knows the truth, even if the world never does. But that night, Elara sleepwalked again. This time, Thomas was staying over, sleeping on her couch. He woke to find her gone. He ran to Widow's Cove, found her standing in the water up to her waist. Her eyes were open but unseeing. Elara, wake up. But she didn't respond. She kept walking deeper. The tide was pulling, the same tide that had claimed Eleanor, the same water. Thomas waded in, grabbed her. She fought him, inhuman strength, her hands wrapped around his throat, not trying to choke him, trying to pull him under. Her voice when it came wasn't her own. It was older, desperate, furious. He must pay, he must drown as I drowned. You will help me, you will finish it. Thomas looked into Elara's eyes, saw someone else looking back, saw a century of rage and betrayal. Eleanor, listen to me. Charles is dead. He's been dead for decades. He paid. Maybe not in the way you wanted, but he paid. He never married, never knew love. He lived alone and died alone. You won, you don't need to hurt anyone else. The grip on his throat loosened slightly. And Elara didn't hurt you. She's trying to help you. She's been your voice. She's told your story. Please let her go. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. The water lapped around them. The moon hung cold and bright. Then Elara gasped, her eyes focused, became her own again. Thomas. He pulled her to shore. They collapsed together on the rocks, both shaking, both alive. Back at the apartment, wrapped in blankets, drinking tea that neither of them tasted, Elara spoke softly. She was in my head. I felt everything, the betrayal, the water filling my lungs, the hands holding me down. She wanted me to drown you, to make you pay for what he did. I know, but I fought her at the end. I remembered you, remembered that I don't want to hurt anyone. That vengeance won't bring her peace. Thomas took her hand. What do you think will? Elara was quiet, then the truth, not just us knowing, everyone knowing. The next morning they went to the Historical Society. Thomas opened the archives to the public. He created an exhibit, Eleanor Hartley, the forgotten bride of Haven's End. He displayed the maid's letter, the timeline, the inconsistencies in Charles's alibi, the suspicious haste of his departure. Ray. He didn't accuse, he just presented the facts. Let people draw their own conclusions. And Elara painted one final portrait, Eleanor Hartley, but not drowning, not dead, alive, young, beautiful, at peace. The eyes that had haunted her for months finally looked calm. They unveiled the exhibit together. The town came. Descendants of both families came. There was anger, denial, but also recognition, acknowledgement. Eleanor's story was no longer forgotten, no longer whispered. It was spoken aloud, given weight, given truth. That night, Elara slept without dreaming, without painting, without the cold presence in the back of her mind. When she woke, Thomas was there. He'd stayed, not out of fear, not to watch over her, but because they'd both realized that what had started as a mystery had become something else. Something real. Something worth keeping. Do you think she's at peace now? Thomas looked at the painting, at Eleanor's calm, grateful eyes. I think she finally got what she needed, someone who cared enough to listen, someone brave enough to see. And what about us? What do we get? Thomas kissed her, soft, sure, real. We get to keep living, keep loving, keep being here. That's more than Eleanor ever got, and I think that's exactly what she'd want for you. Elara picked up her brush. For the first time in months, her hand was her own. She dipped it in paint, started something new, not a face from the past, but the view from her window, the lighthouse, the sea, the morning sun breaking through Haven's End's perpetual gray. Art that was hers again. Life that was hers again. But in the corner of the canvas, barely visible, she painted a small detail. A woman standing on the shore, facing the horizon, finally free. Finally remembered. Finally at peace. The sea remembers, but sometimes with the right people, the right love, the right courage, it also forgives. This has been Echoes of the Forgotten Bride, Episode 2, Her Portrait in the Tide. Join us next time for Episode 3, The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife. Until then, remember that every story deserves to be told, even the ones that drown us.